Welcome to Against the Tide, the podcast where extraordinary social change makers share their stories and their wisdom. Against the Tide is a celebration of courageous women who create lasting impact by daring to forge their own path. We'll dive deep into powerful themes such as the complexity of identity and how it influences the choices we make, embracing change even when it feels uncomfortable, and how breaking free from labels can unlock your true potential. Join me, Jo Metcalf, to hear stories of incredible women who, by swimming against the tide, prove that extraordinary things can happen. This episode features Jen Coe, former athlete and workforce development lead in professional football. Jen, welcome to the podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation. It's been a while in the making.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about your career journey, your sense of justice and culture, and of course, swimming against the tide. So let's get started. You've had such an interesting career. Can you give us a sense of your journey, how you found your why, and what led you to where you are now?
Yeah. For a while, I was talking about how unorthodox my journey was because it wasn't aligned with the traditional route that I was kind of brought up in culturally. So hopped around different spaces, started playing, realised I'd played for quite a time, and that had taken the priority in the basketball world. Wasn't getting paid the big bucks. There was probably perks along the way. And it was at a good level and travelled the world internationally. So I never felt the nudge to be like, well, seriously, what will I get into now? What's the career? And there was never really a push for that at home. But there did come a point where I realised that I was moving on a little bit. So the stuff that I started to pick up linked to the why was, what was I enjoying about sport that wasn't just the camaraderie and the success measure of winning? Because we did have success early on and that was really nice. And I was like, gosh, there's some stuff here that wasn't really good, that I didn't really enjoy. So I went into coaching to fix it. A naive young coach at the time. And then I realised very quickly that I was the only female in that space. And that was another thing. Didn't realise how big or important it was. And was kind of probably in defensive mode, like I'm going to change this, I'm going to do that. Found a couple of mentors, gravitated towards people who could listen and would nourish and were offering advice kind of with me instead of at me. So that led into the end of my playing career where I looked back and thought, gosh, there's a lot of psychology stuff in here. There's a lot of enjoyment, thriving, happiness that's sitting with me. And again, going back to the coaching, I wanted to keep that going. I wanted to bring parents into the mix. I wanted to be transparent. And I was a young coach coaching internationally. I was assistant coach, going through the stages. But there was stuff within that as well around the organisation and some of the ways they worked that just didn't sit with me. So all in typical Jen fashion, moved to the UK, stopped coaching, just kind of said, no, I'm done kind of fighting against this, which I know we'll probably get onto later on, and moved over here. And thought, right, okay, now the career starts, or the different type of career starts. That's when psychology, the analysis, different roles in different sports came in, different jobs that weren't at home. So I was kind of seeing a different side of myself, but holding on to some of those things I'd picked up along the way. And it's funny because the hook for me now in all the different hats I've wore is to see people happy, to see them thriving. And I get emotional, and I still probably haven't nailed down or can be succinct enough on what it is, because it's their happiness. So it's perception of kind of visually what I receive. But it's definitely thriving. It's supporting somebody when the light comes on around something, or somebody who, from a psych perspective, just has a couple of blockers or ways of thinking. And there's just a deep-rooted satisfaction in that.
So what would you describe your why as?
There's probably a strong forefront runner on the one I've just mentioned, like being connected and supporting others. So it's really broad, because I guess that ties to the industries I've been in. And there's a thread that goes through all the different areas, but it still comes back to being connected with other people, listening, supporting them. Like I really get enjoyment when somebody has had their version of success in something. The secondary is the stats that we know exist around women in sport and that landscape. And I think with my first degree, I tried to avoid it, and I went into IT and over into that space because I was like, I'm not going to stay in sport and do all of this, because at home, it didn't seem like it was a career. You know, the NBA that I followed was like the men's game. So it was over there in America. And I really didn't think I could make a career out of it, especially in Ireland where there's so few sports that would give you a salary to live on. So the secondary part is, and which kick-started later on, was, gosh, I could be a different type of role model here, and I could leave the ladder down, all those analogies around supporting the research, supporting visibility in sport. So that's connected, and sometimes it's not at the front, but it's always bubbling away.
We've worked together before, and one thing that stood out to me was your deep sense of justice and your commitment to champion voices that aren't always at the table. Why has equity played such a central role in your life?
Because it's important. It's really important. I think it's the more environments and experiences that I've been exposed to, I'll realise that I have a responsibility, and that the narrative isn't changing as quick as we think it is, but looking back isn't helping us as much. So I think early doors, it was the stuff I mentioned, being a female coach, being an international young female coach, refereeing and being a female in the country, all of those things. I got enjoyment about kind of pushing those doors. They weren't massive ones, but I think I saw the benefit for me if I could see a female coach or a female analyst. Gosh, they were few and far between, but I hooked onto those things. So there was something around that initial stir, and then there was the resistance. So there was definitely the competitiveness of sport came into this space where people were, a phrase I heard, oh, you'll never make it in football. And I was like, what? That is a current I want to swim against. But it was picking the battles, if you like. So, one team I worked with early on. So I was, it feels a little bit uncomfortable saying headhunted, but I was taken from one team to another to do some analysis. And this one was absolutely incredible, Denise. And no other female or analyst in the country working across, and especially in the GAA. So showed me the ropes, then went on maternity leave. So it was a bit deep end, but I always knew she was there. And again, you kind of say women in the GAA, maybe at the younger ages, maybe in the kind of young girls teams, but they were never in the senior men's setup. And this group had just over 20 backroom staff, and along with the nutritionist, shock, I was the only other female. And there was a whole host of stuff at that time where I realised, right, this is kind of moving from the playing career into this working space, if you like, a little bit more, still touched to sport, but all the resistance of, are you this, are you the physio, are you, a parent, are you, whatever you like, all these, from all the men around different stadiums as I would go into, but they didn't have, so I was doing analysis at the time, they wouldn't allow me into the box. They said it was reserved for all the media. They wouldn't, I was kind of blocked. It was almost like a gate, the team are walking through and who are you and what are you doing? So then kit became really important because then I could just have a badge that allowed me in, small little things. But every little conversation around a wrong title, which titles in the bigger sense don't really matter to me, but they do in a sense of influencing and having something that's a safety net. So the justice piece for me is like maybe giving people a chance initially to get it right, and then after that I'll put them in their place, and I'll hold on to that, and I get the bravery or confidence, the courage to do that. I'm trying to share with others and finding a way to do it that's respectful or assertive, that kind of fine line. Sometimes I don't get it right, and the key part for me is what's the best way of saying it is to try and make the table conversation longer. So I've sat around multidisciplinary team meetings in sport. I've sat around boardrooms where the conversation's happening up the other end with a few people. And initially I might have sat quiet, then I might have just waved my flag a little bit, then I was trying to be in on the main project, so I'd have a key part. So trying to find a way to infiltrate the space without needing to be the, can you hear me down here? And that's the main driver at the moment. So whether it's an NGB expanding their board, or it's a head coach stat across the Olympics. In football, I'm really trying to look at the development of our workforce and diversifying that. So yeah, that's the deeper part. But it goes back to the first comment, like it's a must. And I'm not saying that we go one side and the pendulum is over in the women, but we have to fight that corner because it's been overlooked for such a long time.
Yeah. And what's given you that confidence to keep doing that?
Yeah, good question. Others, I think, and a little bit of feedback. So people saying, for example, this is a lovely one actually. Feels a little bit uncomfortable sharing it, but there was a group of girls that I coached, a team years ago, and we went up the ranks, and they had a great time, and it made a difference in the school around their presence. It was an all-girls school, but there was something really lovely and beautiful about that experience. So that happened. 10 years later, I get a message, which is last year. One of those girls is now coaching, and she said they had a really big game, and she messaged me, I think it was through LinkedIn or Instagram message, and she said, Jen, just want to let you know we had this really big game and you were in the dressing room with us. And you told us one time before, which I'd stolen off someone else, mind, if you're feeling nervous, let all the butterflies fly together. And she used that in the dressing room. And we had a little interaction about the impact that she felt I had on her career, and to then influence change within those. And it was more about the whole people developing, and not just the win, not just the dressing room. And those things, I think, in the industry, in the industries I've worked, probably less so psychology and coach development, because the instant feedback isn't necessarily always there. In the industries I've worked, not always do you get the immediate feedback where something has landed or it's been valued. But over the years, the cycle has landed for me where people have come back and said, gosh, that was a great environment we had together. That was a really key message. Or when you used to coach us. So that's kind of kept going over the years. And it's something I bring into my work now, where you can't measure the value of a conversation immediately. And there's just something beautiful in that, I think, over time. That's what keeps me going. And if we see a shift in percentage of research, and we see a shift or visibility, like when I worked at West Ham, we tripled the female staff that were working there. It doesn't mean that we were all having a ball, mind you, but there was an opportunity for those players, those 30 women, to have conversations of a different kind with that staff.
Fantastic. And how has it informed your leadership style?
So I think I thought before that me being in the room was important. And I have talked about, the as my granddad would say, the thick skin of me going in and saying, what I needed to say. But it's definitely the last few years, if not longer, who's coming behind. And that's a part of how I present myself, how I enter a room, how I engage. It feels like I'm trying to leave a footprint of, actually, there's value. And it might be the most ignorant mindset someone's had. Is there's value in having a woman in the room. There's value in having somebody who's not from the same sport. There's value in having somebody who listens in a different way. I'm 12 years in London now, came over as an Irish woman, openly gay, recently has a baby, and now working as a woman in football. I worked in industries that I have never worked in before. So there's always an opportunity, I think, to find a connection. So it's not, I might have seen those early on as barriers or hurdles, and now I see them as perspectives and lenses to look through as a leader.
Yeah, fantastic. Our conversations have always left a mark on me as well. So yeah, definitely.
Likewise.
Like you say, you just don't know, do you? What role does doubt play in how you show up in the work that you do?
Oh, it's there. It's there. I did a Spotlight Mindflick accreditation years ago, and on their profiles, like a personality profile, and on one of their pages, I saw this line that said, confidence doesn't mean the absence of self-doubt. This quote. And I hung on to that, because I think for such a long period of time, when I'm in those spaces, those roles where I'm the only female, or one of two, or there's a bit of resistance, comments that are rude, you're overlooked, all of those things. I'm held together. And so when I give over the years, when I give myself time to think about what I'd achieved, or opportunities that could still come, or conversations that I could influence some shift in something, a thought or a narrative, the doubt was always there as the pusher. And I knew when I was having some doubt in a thought or a feeling, a little bit of that imposter coming in, I knew there was progress happening. I was uncomfortable for some reason. And once I paused and evaluated that, I can, and tied it with that quote of, I can still have the courage and have the confidence to say and do those things and move. The doubt can still be there. And just how much attention I pay to it, how important it is. When it takes over, then who are my people around me that can help? I think that's where that is. And for a long time, I think there was how do we get rid of it, especially in the psych area, how do you reframe those thoughts and draw a line in the sand and all of that. But it was more about letting it be, just accepting that it's there and it's going to be there. And there's sometimes I can move on from it, and sometimes I just carry it with me.
And how does it really feel for you? And can you share any examples?
How does the doubt feel? A critical friend? Yeah, it does. It feels like a critical friend who's saying, hey, watch out for this. But I've got to dial up the other side to make sure it doesn't drown me out. It's a weird one because I think I need it there to drive me on. And I think the doubt is maybe a whole case of comments and situations that have unsettled me. I read a lot, I listen a lot, I connect a lot. So that builds the confidence in knowing that where I'm at and what I want to do and what I know has an underpin that's not just connected to my why, it's connected to research and other really, it's grounded, So yeah, I think there's something in that as a critical friend that it just needs to find the balance. But it's important.
You talked in there about managing that.
Yeah.
How do you manage that yourself?
I think I'm aware of the feeling of it, and I'm aware of the key people that I would need to connect in with. So as far as a parallel, I've got my wife at home who's incredible, who will give perspective, knows me inside out, so will highlight something that she's noticing. I'll have some mentors that are on the go regularly, tapping in and out of and having conversations, sometimes prior to a feeling building. I think I like to take on big projects as well, and like recording a podcast, co-editing books, things that put you out there a little bit more. Like I tried to do 4 or 5 lectures with a university in a year on a topic, different universities. Makes me really nervous, makes me doubt myself. Things where I would be in front of a camera or sharing something, I can feel something creeping in, but it's so important that they're there. It makes me fine tune my thinking. It helps for deeper reflection. It helps with self-awareness. And then helps me realise where the gaps are then on who I might need around. Now, don't get me wrong, Jo, there's always a call to my mum who'll tell me I'm brilliant. Or actually sometimes she might not. She might give me a good reality check on what's happened over there in London to you. So I think there's a nice balance of, I think that's what it is. There's definitely kind of the somatic stuff around it, but probably situational. And like, for example, I just talked to one. I delivered at a conference recently, and it was a while since I'd been on stage hosting a panel. And I had a choice early on to overanalyze and talk to them excessively, so I knew every granular detail, but I knew that would kill me. I knew going on stage then I'd have to think about myself, and I wanted them to really enjoy the experience. I'd be going into all the finer details with them just to make them feel like they had a great experience, but it might not to the audience. It might be too much. And I also thought, well, what does good look like and feel like after this session? So I did some stuff that I was really disappointed in and fumbled, and I just didn't maximise the opportunity. And I just got in the car on the way home and I said, you have 5 minutes now, Jen. So I had a good chat to myself on the 5 minutes, recorded a little audio reflection so I could revisit that, and then parked it. And I was so happy with myself. And then when my wife rang on the way home. She's like, well, how did it go? Well, I'll tell you this. It went, and I said X, Y, and Z, but I'm drawing a line in the sand. So when I get home, we won't talk about it, because those are the situations that would have drowned me out before,
Definitely. And all that definitely resonates with me. If anyone's listening and that resonates with them, what would you say to them?
I think the key part is to accept it's there. Accept it's there, know the role it plays, and know what your strengths are. To have the courage to say when the doubt kind of becomes a little bit stronger, the internal dialogue becomes a bit more frequent, that you have the people around you that you need to dilute that you have the tools, other tools that you might use yourself to help build that confidence and take the chance. So if we use the example of applying for jobs, like we know that the research says, and just general insight over the years, that less women apply for jobs, definitely in my world. I'm going out looking for people to apply to understand how they can do the job. They don't need to have the entirety of that job description. They're sharing something really valuable from a different perspective. And I think this is kind of a silly example, but it's something that I think people can have the courage to do and just say, okay, well, I have the doubt. Well, where's the doubt coming from? What role is it playing? What do I already have to give to this role or to this situation or to this conversation? There was a really interesting came across something on Instagram last night that I thought would be good to share. I took a screenshot. It was something that was right up my street. It was a quote about how we need to be ready for the silence. So I don't know the neuroscience, so I won't quote that part, but it was essentially saying how men are wired to just not hear women's voices, right? There was something along that line. Okay. But it did catch me around what if there's been a period of time where we have been supporting the empowerment of women, but not supporting the environments to be ready for these empowered women to come into them. And there's a silence. So we have to be ready for that silence. And there was a little bit of an oomph in me going, yeah, I do. And I will. And I'll embrace that. And that links to something I mentioned earlier. You can see me getting animated about this. I've been part of a number of different groups, task force that want to really make an impact on women in sport or women working in sport. But they always talk about the past for so long. And I'm not saying it's redundant. It's so vitally important. But we've got to look forward. And that's what gets me going. It's like, yeah, okay, listen, there is going to be silence. And there's a number of reasons why. And we are years away from equity. Years and years and years. And so we just have to embrace that and understand how we can play a part without breaking ourselves. And that for me is the key part of like those messages that we might pick up, the people you have around you, the doubt that exists. It's there. It might not go away. There's some tools for that. Find the right people to keep around you and find the balance and just be courageous when you can.
Fantastic. You spoke a few times around having the right people around you, having mentors. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah. I probably wouldn't have called them mentors back in the day. The early jump into coaching, well, actually go before that, as an athlete for years and years. So I swam, I did Irish dancing, we won't go there, not a great experience. The chats that I would have had with our swimming coach, Brian, who passed away last year, an incredible man. He allowed me to just be me. I think the sport wasn't for me, the competitiveness of the sport wasn't for me. But the words of wisdom he shared, the way we interacted, there was something of a moment, and the snapshot is getting out of the pool, say, I would have started menstruating really early. So it was an awkward swimming age of 10 or 11. And he understood as much as he was, I suppose he understood that I needed support. And that was the support he provided was, why don't you get dressed and come out? And so I'd sit up on the bank at the back wall with him and we'd chat about all different things. And I think there was something in the way he engaged, listened, that I held on to as a coach. And then other coaches would come and watch my sessions, would invite me to go and watch theirs in different sports. So this coach development stuff without a title was appearing really early on because I started coaching when I was 16. And then when I went into coaching, kind of the teams that were winning a little bit more and more out in the forefront of the cup and the league and the big club stuff and international, the people who were immediately around me all had what's the best way to describe it? Their own agenda. Let's just say that they had their own agenda. So other conversations with people like those mentors. One was a guy who was my international coach as a player, Jerry. We started a company a few years ago. Best friend's dad, like just a great human being, right? Really informed, so humble. He's a mentor. He's been a mentor for years, and there's a whole load of other people that at the time I would have just thought good friends, great listeners, good conversation, but they were always dropping nuggets in it and never felt like tell. And so that's where I think I gravitated towards the role of coach developer. It was, how can I listen and support and understand this person and what their ambitions are? And the mentoring role and coach development role, they're intertwined. So yeah, and some of that would have been family. There's titles in courses where people have said, who's in your boardroom, and formalise it. And that's helpful for people when you think, okay, who's my strategic person, my listening ear, and who affirms the biases and stuff. So there's a more formal structure that can be helpful, I'm sure, for progression and for those people from a career perspective. But for me, it's been people who've listened, believed, dropped stuff in, and sometimes went, oof, I think you might be off the mark there, but wouldn't tell me, exactly what I needed to do because they needed me to figure that out.
Yeah, just give you a nudge.
Yeah.
You've spoken about recognising when others are swimming against the tide. What do you do when you see it in others?
That's changed over the years.
Okay.
Linking to the mentoring conversations, I need to challenge what my assumptions are before I dive in. So before it would have been to wrap my arms around somebody, to go and it still probably wouldn't be as as much or instruction, but it would have been to go and save them, to go over and to be there beside them, which sounds kind of arrogant and hierarchical. And it probably was for a while because some of the experiences I had, I didn't want others to have. And so there's an opportunity to listen somewhere along the line. I think what's changed for me over the years is trying to find a way to understand what my perception of the situation is, where they are, and then if I can offer. And if it's not me, can I signpost? Fortunately, a lot of people reach out, but if I do spot it in others, that is the way, because I think there's been loads of examples, even in sport over the years. Sport as an athlete, when I work with coaches and I watch the athletes, when I work with coaches, that I'm going into very new environments, very different environments where habits have been formed and people's behaviours have maybe become what they feel they needed to be in those situations. So you may see in football a lot, the way it would be a male-dominated space, that they would be what they think the people around them need them to be. So me coming in with an observation might not be helpful. And having a conversation, creating rapport, building trust, to then listen to what they want to get, why they're in that space and why they're doing what they do. And if there's an opportunity for me to share something at a better point, then I will. I tried to do that early on in a different sport, in a different time, and it just didn't land. And I thought, oh gosh, how arrogant of me. Imagine if someone had done that to me, which they did at times, and I probably just went, oh, thanks very much, and moved on. So that's probably how I do it. I think there's something, if I may, paralleling that. If it was a really obnoxious, misogynistic remark, or it was somebody who had the opportunity to help somebody, I use the analogy of leaving the ladder down or whatever it might be, to help them swim against the tide, I might just throw the armbands at them. Just like, save yourself for a second. I need to help out here. And that might be to put the person, to make the person who made the comment aware of the comment they've made and how it landed for me, to support that person. But I think the dynamic, that example isn't really great, because then that person in the room might also feel something. So it's trying to measure up what I would stand for and where my values and the line is crossed, irrespective of who's in the room, and less about kind of helping somebody else. But there might be times where somebody has just been at the receiving end of crap for such a long time. And I just don't think it's acceptable.
And if someone's listening and knows somebody that's swimming against the tide, what would you recommend to them?
Find the currents that you have the strength to swim against. There's definitely some that are worth it, and then others might take too much out of you. So I think there's something about evaluating what's worth it, and there's something about the progress. There's something about the small movements that you stop and congratulate and evaluate yourself on. That reflection piece of, look at how far I've come, look at the great work I'm doing. And that might be enough for them. Maybe the timeline or the cadence is important in there as well, and that whole picture of, why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? Like one of the books recently that came out, are Women Working in Sport. There's a number of chapters in that where women are talking about how they felt they were paving the way. It's like what I mentioned earlier. I thought it was me as a leader being in the room, and to a certain aspect, in a certain way, me being in the room is important, but it's not. The bigger picture is who's coming behind, and that's how they were representing their story. So I think around swimming against the tide is, what current can you get involved in? How strong of a swimmer are you? What equipment do you need? Are you on a paddleboard? You know, all those stuff I could bring in to this great title. So I think, yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
Fantastic. We've talked before about how behaviours, positive and negative, can ripple through individuals and organisations. Can you share some examples and where you've seen positive behaviours create impact?
Yep. So the more recent one is when I worked at West Ham. We made a conscious effort. So we were doubling, tripling the female presence. And that came from my drive, a request from the players, and an immediate amount of feedback around deeper levels of conversation and connectivity. Not to say that the other staff weren't doing their very best and weren't highly qualified. It just created a wider breadth of conversation that they felt comfortable having. Signage was another one. So I came in, there's a massive big sign on the wall that you're in the women's block. That was it. Just a massive big kind of low badge. No dressing room signs. We were on site in the boys' academy. So from the other angle, you didn't know where any of the rooms were. There was no sense of pride or kind of culture, climate, rather than floating around. So we had canvases created in the lounge. We created a library. We had a conversation around the purpose of each room. So this is a silly one probably, but it was really important for the players that they had a room that they could pass through. So that was their lounge, what we called. So we got a TV on the wall, the library, some games. They had an area to eat, a little canteen. And to get to the presentation room that was next to it, everyone used to walk through it, staff and all. So we just put a sign up to say, no, staff walking through. And all of a sudden it became a little bit more of a private space. And there was another entrance, just became a kind of lazy way to walk through. Put the signs up. One of the proudest moments was in the corridor. We had loads of representation of the boys who'd made the senior men's first team, and the big photos, bios, murals, all of this, and nothing for the women. So just as you come out of the canteen, which we shared with the boys, we would get this massive big canvas done up of a team photo in the stadium. And it was something simple when I say it out loud, but that visibility and other photos just made it feel a little bit more. Then we started to talk about how we'd have different meetings, and different ways that we walked meant that we'd have organic conversations. And we talked about it as staff. What's our capacity today to have a conversation? Okay, I feel like I'm in great form, I'm in good form, I can listen. So I will ask, how are you? And I'll be ready to answer, and I'll stop in the hallway and I'll have a conversation. If I don't feel like I'm able to, then I won't engage, and I'll say, I hope you have a good day, I'll catch you later. And so small ways to build rapport, small ways to think about the language we used. Fist pumping became a thing, I think, around COVID, or elbow. So how can we continue that with a bit more intentionality, some eye contact? So not eradicating the banter, because that would have taken me probably a long time to get rid of banter. And people would argue it has its place, but there was something around humour, the use of it, and these positive shifts around visibility, seeing the room, how we engaged with people, how we welcomed other people in from other industries and included them in the day. So it became the norm that we would have somebody from another industry, another sport, come and hang out for the day. And that they were the biggest change. We had a wellbeing room as well, which was a big kind of space for people to feel comfortable, beanbags and all of that. But the smaller nuances and shifts and the constant feedback, asking, sharing through the leadership group, through surveys, through organic conversations, and through some kind of tough conversations on, listen, this feedback's come back. Nobody's getting fired. We need to chat about how that message might have landed, or how the meetings are not really equipped for the players, more for the staff, and they're too long, or learning kind of coming in and curiosity around what's happening behind that door, and there's a lot of laughing there, and you're reading this book. Those kind of things, that'd probably be one example, that some of those could be shared across other spaces as well, that really shifted our way of being.
We spoke before about that sense of sort of belonging,
Yeah.
haven't we? And how you sort of build that. In contrast, where poor behaviours have had a damaging effect.
I think I have loads of examples of this, and I'm nervous to share. I'm nervous to share openly who and where, but I can share that it's everywhere. It has been in all the spaces I've operated in. Some of them were feedback, or this term of psychological safety, like how we create a space where people feel listened to, but not all the time. And how people can know the importance of their role, the clarity of their role, how we can give and receive and generate effective feedback. Those, when that hasn't been there, it has been toxic. It has been really hard to exist in those spaces. It has, I've moved on from some industries and roles and spaces, teams, because mentally I have just emptied the tank too much, where I was going to work wondering what was going to happen. And at the time, you're talking about a confident, 10 years of working on this really hard, that I have confidence and bravery to go into situations and listen and use humour at the right time and offer feedback and support people and push doors, all of those things, and still come home at the end of the day going, I can't turn off, I can't switch off. There's too many tabs open. So I think those were everywhere, and finding ways to do the stuff I mentioned about how do we move this on? Is this worth moving on? Can I do this? Who do I need around me? Are they ever going to change? And some of those spaces haven't changed. People have left. People have been fired. The environment, I got a message the other day from somebody who said, kind of what I was mentioning earlier on, thanks so much for your time. I didn't realise at the time the environment you created was really special. It was really important. Now, it wasn't me, it was us. It was the permission I got to do stuff. It was the bravery that we all had to embrace change and difference. But yeah, it's everywhere. And that's, going back to the points about women's role, presence, the equity, the justice. We really have to keep going.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's obviously there's lots in there that I'm sure we could dig into all day. But thank you so much. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh gosh, I've often thought about this. Letters to yourself and all those exercises. I think I'm afraid to go there by going back. I don't know how emotional I'd get going back to see who I really was back there. And I still thought at the time, I don't think I was in the trenches, but I was not the version of myself that I needed to be. I was somebody else's version of me. And I still think over time, I've even going into different jobs, I've thought about who I want to be when I go in, how I want to be received. And there's that need for affirmation and validation that I think will always be there, but how much weight I put on it has shifted. So the word, this is probably going to sound cheesy, one of the ones I've come to think about is don't chase perfection, just keep progressing. And it's linked to that, the end goal and the journey and all that. But I definitely was chasing this perfect picture. So I didn't choose the traditional method at home. for school, for education, as far as university. I picked a course that I never used. I did a 4-year degree in IT. All I can do is work technology really well now. Nothing to do with programming. I didn't earn the millions. But I never realised that actually, well, using that example, I've always been really comfortable as an analyst in different situations for presentations that I could fix the technology at the last minute. But the picture of why I went into technology at the time, it's this really silly example, but I was always trying to get a job that was perfect, a role that was perfect, a title that was perfect, something that was polished, deeply reflecting and criticising myself for such a long time. I needed to do this and be this and say that. And just relax now is where I'm at. Just like look at the progress you've made. Look at the brilliant stuff you've done. And some of that is just conversations, like that text message that I received. I was like chuffed when I received the other message from someone about the environment. Like, that's it. I'm made up over that, and less about the degrees, the masters, the other stuff, the salaries, all these other things that for ages I was striving towards. So there's that, yeah. I think that's the key, one of the key ones. One other one was, and it's mentioned definitely here today, was I do think without the weight of the world that we do have a responsibility, without the weight of the world we do have a responsibility to keep that door open for others. And so, yes, I might be leaning over to one side and supporting more women and encouraging them to do more and to get into those jobs. But I think that's really important, because if I'm not doing it and I'm in a position that I can influence change, then I don't think I'm playing a fair role here.
Fantastic. That's incredible. And you've had an amazing career, so definitely worth celebrating. What are your hopes for the future?
I think that I can stay close to my purpose. Because all the stuff I've mentioned there, I'm still highly competitive and I want to break down the barriers and influence change. But I have to keep checking in with myself at what cost, and to not lose myself. So if I really thrive and I'm deeply connected to other people thriving and supporting their kind of journey, then that's what I've got to stay close to. And I think that connection to why is really important. So the hopes for the future, that was a bit of a selfish answer, wasn't it? But I think broader and wider is that we keep moving the dial, that the percentage of research done on women in sport, the ways of thinking about designing cultural and economic shifts and buildings and all of the things that we could do that are done with a more diverse lens.
Fantastic. And finally, can you tell us about your book, what it's about and when can we get it?
Oh yeah, so it's out. Dr. Amy Whitehead and I had carried out 2 books, and in the webinars that were associated, then more and more women were coming into the room saying that this myth and that myth had helped them. And as Amy and I sat one Saturday, we thought maybe there might be a really good purposeful book here that we could influence change in organisations. So women working in sport came out of that. And there was a stat at the time in 2020, there was a stat in 2020 by McKinsey that we had read, and it was saying that diverse leadership increases output and performance by 33%. And we thought, right, we can actually, there's nobody going to go and look at a women in sport book on a shelf who is lacking self-awareness and doesn't see the need for change. So how can we, through inspiring stories and really challenging moments, not just have somebody feel uplifted by what they're reading, but use it as a vehicle for change and have conversations and understand what their environment looks like that might not be the most productive. So that was where the book came from, and it's women working in sports. See them, be them, hear them is what we've said. It's on the publisher's website, Sequoia, and it's on Amazon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And you're doing incredible work and championing equity and pushing against that tide. So keep pushing and keep swimming. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening to Against the Tide, brought to you by Joe Metcalf and Louise Kavanagh. We're grateful to the team at Sticks and Glass in Leeds and Bison Studios in London, our inspiring guests and wonderful listeners. Subscribe to Against the Tide wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.